Let's move on now to the Iranian regime's brutal crackdown on protesters. I spoke a little earlier about how the figure has been put at 648 people by a human rights group, but they also say the real number of deaths could be more than 6,000 protesters killed by the regime. And the regime is now set to execute the first protester, a 26-year-old man sentenced to hanging tomorrow for, quote, waging war against God. US President Donald Trump had over the weekend warned Tehran that violence against protesters would be met with a US military response. And while he did speak yesterday, Kosha, about the regime wanting to negotiate, the White House has also confirmed he is weighing up whether to still bomb Iran. Do you think that the US will move to actually launch strikes now that we're learning more about how many protesters are being killed and now sentenced to death?
One of the things about President Trump is he is very unpredictable. He wears that as a badge of honor, and it's one of his tactics, really, where you never know which way he's going to go. What we can do is look at what his preference and his pattern has been historically. He really does not like the idea of troops on the ground. He knows his base is very much against it, as atrocious as what's happening there on the ground is for the Iranian people. Doesn't want to get sucked into another quagmire. We also know that he is not shy to do these quick surgical either bombs or operations like what we saw in Venezuela, and of course just the 12-day war here with Iran. So I think he has proven that he is willing to do that, even sometimes at the cost of not having that favored by his base. He has done it and could very well do that. I think the other thing that he really loves is economic sanctions, where if that does the job before getting involved militarily, that tends to be his tool of preference. And the only thing that the Iranian regime really has now, their lifeblood, is oil, and exports of oil specifically to China is the biggest buyer of it. So if he somehow is able to toughly tighten the sanctions on that, or even do something physical, that some flavor of what happened in Venezuela, to somehow put a choke point on that, I think that's what he would favor probably more than bombing.
He has announced,
time will tell.
He did announce on that point he was imposing a 25% tariff on goods from nations with commercial ties to the regime. How do you think that's enough? Do you think that would be effective?
Possibly. I think for an economy that's as much in despair as Iran is right now, there's something like half the people are below the poverty line, inflation is 40% plus, that kind of thing can have an impact. But as we're seeing, just with what you're saying with the executions and the mass arrests and everything else, they've blacked out the internet. This regime is going to fight back, and certainly won't go down easily, even if they are on the brink of despair economically. So whether the number is 25 or it needs to go higher, or there needs to be more of an embargo from other nations, remains to be seen. It gets complicated because allies of the U.S., like India and others, are buyers as well of that oil, so that's where things get politically tricky. But I think that's going to be where he goes first, as opposed to going very kinetic. But again, with him, you never know.
No, you never know, and it will happen in the middle of the night. Like it did last time on Iran, and then they'll do the explainer later, or even with Venezuela. You just don't know. But no doubt he will take tough action if it is needed. Look, let's turn to something a bit lighter now. Yesterday's Golden Globes became yet another chance for self-righteous Hollywood celebrities to virtue signal about the latest leftist cause. And this time, the usual suspects exchanged their Palestine pins for ones calling for ICE out and be good. Now, that one is in tribute to Renee Good, the woman who was shot by an ICE agent after being accused of driving her car in his direction. Here's actor Mark Ruffalo with more about why he's wearing his pin. And hint, this, we don't have the soundbite, I'm told, but it is expert Trump derangement level. Kosha, he goes on to talk about Venezuela and the illegal invasion and how Trump doesn't care about international law. And then he says, well, Trump is a convicted rapist and a pedophile. I don't know how he can get away with calling the president a pedophile. I think Trump's lawyers might be in contact. But these celebrities never fail to shove their moral superiority down our throats, do they?
Never, ever, even when it's getting old, and it doesn't seem to have the same sting that perhaps it had when Trump first entered the political arena in 2016, and they were all doing this. On the point about calling him a quote, convicted rapist and pedophile, that is something that actually very well could earn Mike Ruffalo a lawsuit, potentially. And again, I say this because Trump has done this, most recently for exactly that, to George Stephanopoulos and ABC, because that actually is something that is factually untrue. The E. Jean Carroll case that they always love to point to, that was not actually what the allegation was or what the conviction was based on. So he has cause there, even though it is very, very hard in the U.S. with the First Amendment for public figures to sue. That one might have been a bridge too far for him. But, you know, that's what Hollywood does. Renee Good is their latest political martyr, just like the black squares with George Floyd and all of that. I know nobody wore anything about Charlie Kirk, for an example, but we aren't surprised.
True. No, we aren't surprised. And I guess Renee Good is the latest cause du jour, how they signal to everyone that they are morally better than the rest of us. Interesting on your point about the rapist and pedophile thing. I mean, obviously there were pictures lately of Trump, which we've seen over many years of Trump with Epstein, but there was never any suggestion of wrongdoing, and nothing has ever come out in all the files and all the releases. So I really don't know how he can even make that allegation, let alone the convicted rapist one. And I do think Trump might have a case. I mean, he's been quite happy to pull the legal trigger against the BBC, for example. I don't know. I think Mark Ruffalo should be a bit worried.
He probably should. And, you know, I always say that if they had something of that nature against Trump, it would have come out in the Biden years when Biden controlled the DOJ and the Epstein files. It didn't. So there isn't anything there. Mark Ruffalo should watch his inbox.
Yeah, maybe he should. Maybe he'll be wearing a different kind of pin next year. Who knows? Okay, Kosha Gada, thank you so much for your time.